My name is Lieutenant Colonel Clay Redinger, and currently I'm the Battalion Inspector Instructor for 2nd Battalion, 23rd Marines. The purpose of the following video is to provide some best practices for a new company INI or an INI First Sergeant from some folks that have been in the job for a while. I would like to stress that each unit and situation is different, but what follows are some valuable lessons learned and recommendations from Marines who have succeeded in the billet you are about to tackle. Your mission is readiness and relationships. Readiness of your people and your equipment are paramount. With regard to equipment and training, you will need to understand acronyms like GCSS, GCPC, PR Builder, and a litany of others that you're not currently probably familiar with. Don't be shy about asking for help in areas where you don't have the expertise to maintain readiness and accountability of your equipment, but at the same time, make no mistake, you have some reading ahead. Remember, battalion and regiment can help you. Same thing applies to personnel. The McCram is your new bedtime reading and desk reference. The more prepared you are administratively and medically, and your unit is prepared administratively and medically, the less time it will take you to get to ILOC should your unit be tasked to mobilize. And those could be valuable days or weeks for preparation. With regard to relationships, you have to focus threefold. One is having a tight squad that you lead daily in the form of your INI staff. Trust and respect must be maintained, and standards must be upheld in such a small unit. Secondly, your relationship with the SMCR can make your duties fun and constructive or counterproductive depending on your mindset. Empathy and the indirect approach are concepts to keep in mind. Finally, you and your Marines are generally the face of the Marine Corps in your community. That relationship with the community must remain exemplary for the service and for the good of the unit. All of the above actions will generate a healthy unit that is focused on mission accomplishment. So, how do you do that? You do it by being a student of people. You must assess the strengths and weaknesses of your Marines and higher headquarters Marines to know where you need to mitigate failure and reinforce success in organizations that are often manned to one each, and sometimes those folks are gapped. You may be an 0302 or an 8999, but in this billet you may need to be an 0311, an 0111, an 04, an 06, or even a 3043 at times to accomplish the mission. You have to play the hand you're dealt. Remain positive, patient, and selfless. Check your ego at the door and be the best small unit leader in the Marine Corps in a billet where you can really excel with a mission-oriented attitude and a focus on the Marines in your charge.
When I first received orders to be part of the INI staff, there were reservations, but that was really just because of a lack of education and not understanding what the reserve component was about. Very quickly, realized that it's not much different than an active duty unit. It was really easy to fall in line with and came to really enjoy it. And again, it's just not very different from the active forces. You'll be surprised by the capabilities, the general level of motivation from each one of these Marines that you see on a monthly basis instead of a daily basis.
When I first found out I was coming onto an INI duty, there were definitely reservations. Thinking about it as from a training perspective, it can be difficult to wrap your head around trying to get guys proficient in 2 days a month. There were a lot of questions about how we would go about accomplishing that, but at the same time I knew I was going to have a very small staff. I knew I was going to have a very small and tight team, and I was excited to get down to it.
I can't recall exactly what I was thinking when I was told I was coming to INI duty. I knew it was going to be challenging because I had kind of worked with the unit that I was being stationed at, but I really didn't understand. I wasn't even close to understanding the amount of work and the broad spectrum of administrative areas that we have to cover. And I think that was my biggest challenge during my first tour.
As a newly assigned inspector instructor, first you can look forward to attending a INI conference down in New Orleans. You want to quickly get your hands on an INI guidebook, and that's regardless of version. Something published in 2012 will still have relevant information in it. You can look into a turnover binder from your predecessor. It'll feed into your site-specific concerns and best practices. Try and obtain a current or a future training plan and identify the gaps that you can later influence. And lastly, but most importantly, is listen to the current INI staff and the Marines that have been with the company for a long period of time. They are invaluable and they will truly help you settle into your role. 3 important aspects in no particular order is the relationship with the SMCR Marines. You want to build that relationship from the beginning, and it starts with the company commander. Just remember that you are advising and not commanding that unit or company. You need to be able to accept that things will be done differently. These Marines have civilian obligations that influence their participation and attendance. The next aspect would be military funeral honors. It's a zero defect mission, and I would just encourage you to revisit and refine your SOPs as often as possible. And last is inspections with a limited staff. I would encourage you to maintain a SharePoint command inspection program. Reach out to the inspectors early and often, and prepare a brief for their arrival. And lastly, self-inspect your staff. You need to inspect what you expect. So keep those Marines honest and make sure that you are ultimately aware of everything that will be inspected. With regards to training the SMCR Marines, just understand that they are very capable, they're impressionable, they're motivated. So make training interesting and unfamiliar, and then your attendance will remain high. I can't emphasize planning enough. Just plan for the deep fight. That's at least 24 months out. Plan for a second course of action. You'll often rely on Army installations and services that just may not go your way. You can plan for white space efficiencies and to play admin catch up. And then lastly, just ensure that accountability is stressed and that training is always remaining safe. As the inspector instructor, there's several functional areas that you can influence. Most important is the administration. The majority of your time and effort will be spent on it, and you really do have a lot to learn. You can review MCAT and FRAP results from the past, and then request adjacent companies or your battalion to help supervise and fix corrections and findings. Your supply section is also a functional area you can supervise, and it's likely that you'll fall in a large account as the RO, and you need to take the time to scrutinize each one of your assets by quantity. You want to avoid stockpiling and identify deficiencies that may later impact training. Maintenance is another large one. You can supervise transactions. You can ensure that your degraded equipment is functional in a timely manner. And then last is the medical readiness of the company. It affects morale, participation within the company. A cohesive inspector-instructor staff will naturally stay engaged. Inherently, each one of the Marines will fall in on a certain set of collateral duties, or they'll hold multiple billets that can often be found at the battalion level. The Marines will each be influenced to attend schools, whether that's for specialized training or for career advancement. They will have that opportunity. I've also found that inspector-instructor duty is the perfect environment for increasing responsibility, and I think that those Marines have the opportunity to grow into the next rank. Lastly is that you can fully integrate these Marines into the SMCRTO. So if a Marine's an operations chief or if he's a training chief, he could very well find himself a platoon sergeant or a company gunnery sergeant. So there's always work to be done, and there's always preparations for the upcoming drill weekend.
That's one of my main priorities is administration. Now, one thing that you need to consider is reserve admin and active duty admin are completely different. My recommendation is you become familiar with the MCRAM, the Marine Corps Reserve Administration Management Manual. That will help you be successful in your billet. A great tool that will help the first sergeant in his admin duties is a MFR tool called G1 Report Card. In that G1 Report Card, there's certain metrics that they're looking for: missing STR, service treatment record books, missing fitness reports, zero-dot composite scores. This tool allows you as an I&I first sergeant to know exactly what your discrepancies are within your company, and it's your responsibility to ensure that it gets done through the assistance of the company first sergeant. You actually got to mentor the company first sergeant. Once again, keep in mind that for most part of the month, he's not there. He's not thinking about fitness report gaps. He's not thinking about pros and cons that are required semi-annually. He's not thinking about promotion pros and cons. It's your responsibility to speak to that first sergeant and let him know these are the things that need to be accomplished during the drill weekend. It's a unique relationship between me, the company first sergeant, and the company commander. Now, you got to keep in mind that these two billets, for the most part of the month, for about 28 days out of the month, they're not in the office. So as a first sergeant, what I try to do is keep them informed of what's going on with the company, with their Marines. So I'll send them emails, follow up with phone calls. Now, when they do come into drill, I usually like to speak to them individually and inform them on the things that we as a company need to accomplish, because once again, during the month, they may have forgotten what we're requesting for them to get completed. You're going to be receiving all kinds of phone calls, emails from veterans organization requesting color guards, requesting static displays. My recommendation to you is that you give them the email or the phone number to Mar 4Res PAO, because they're the ones that need to screen it and ensure that it meets the requirements in order for the local I&I unit to be assigned to that community relation. As an I&I first sergeant, you need to know that missing a funeral or being late to a funeral, that's not an option. It's a no-fail mission. Now, you receive the funeral tasker from higher headquarters. It comes with a checklist. You need to ensure that checklist gets followed to a T. Now, one of your responsibilities as well is to ensure that those funeral honors is conducted appropriately. Now, we're not all drill masters. My recommendation to you is that you open up the drill manual and you do your homework to ensure that those honors are conducted and conducted appropriately.
Understand that you, myself, and everyone here at Battalion, you are ultimately all one of one. What I mean by that is you are the representative of your company, basically, and there's usually only 8 to 11 of y'all on an individual staff. So a lot of people are going to be doing a lot of different jobs. At Battalion, they might actually have up to 25 to 30 people to support the entire I&I staff. This is going to be supporting an SMCR unit that's looking at 1,000 people. Therefore, it's understandable that people are going to be operating outside their lanes, or they're going to be off in support of something else based on the shortage of personnel. So within that, a way to help is the simple fact of you need to CC two to three different people when you email. This is not to insult anyone. It's just simply to recognize that if one person goes on leave, that functional area might have started to already shut down. And so if your action is needed or as friction is being incurred, this will enable people to assist and break it down earlier than later, causing much less friction for you and less head fires for hire. Second part I would say is to understand the PCS season of your battalion I&I staff. Normally this would be transparent to you at a company level. Officers and staff NCOs would come and go. Active duty fleet, that's maybe the case. Out here on I&I duty, that's not the case, because once again, we're one of one, and so that personality and skill set that is often not developed because people are coming for the first time to I&I duty, there's a whole different language and a whole different set of skills that are needed to be developed. Understanding that PCS season and that initial 3 to 4 months of getting your hands and your vocabulary wrapped around the reserve world will enable you to ensure that any upcoming friction can try to be mitigated before that predecessor leaves. I would say a phone call or text message will go far, far, far longer than another email. On average, I&I staff's going to get 50 to 60 emails a day because you're getting contacted directly from representatives in New Orleans, you're getting contacts from higher regiment, or you're being pinged from the companies, which again are at 4 to 6 different sites. So when you extrapolate that much information on a daily basis, if you need a crisis elevated, there really is no better way to do it than phone call or text. I say that because you can't, for most cases, walk down the hall to the other person. That leads me to my last point, walking down the hall. The battalion I&I, the battalion I&I sergeant major, and the assistant I&I, utilize them in manners that you normally would not in an active duty fleet. Sometimes you're going to have to get your 05 or your sergeant major involved in something that would seem very much outside of their lane in a normal unit. This is due to the fact that you've only got 25 to 30 people that you're working with. So it's not to insult people, and it's not to call them out to their boss. It really is just because you need action taken, and sometimes that priority has to be elevated quickly. So we're in too small of a staff overall as I&I to have hurt feelings based on the fact that somebody needs to wander down and get the 05 to involved, not to get things in trouble, get people in trouble, but simply to get things moving because that priority needs to be elevated. The best thing a company I&I can do to assist the assistant I&I, who is the supply officer and also the fiscal officer, is to forecast early. One of the biggest things that you'll come across for problems is what's known as the nickname, the tyranny of distance, where your sites are separated from either an hour to across state lines. So if you've got known requirements within a limited personnel, the best way to communicate that is early and often within the quarter, because we're going to have to push those requirements up to regiment, who is often geographically separated, who then ultimately everything's going to filter back to New Orleans. So we have working against time zones, we're working against different states.
So the ability to forecast early and often significantly helps with that. A way to significantly improve your reserve staff and enable them to integrate with your active duty folks is what's known as ADOS. This is a chance to bring in that Lance Corporal to help turn wrenches in motor T or help in your communication section, who sometimes doesn't even have a job. So he's available Monday through Friday to simply enable you to come in and help, because you're going to be doing a lot of extra duties that you wouldn't encounter in the fleet, whether this is military funeral honors, color guard relations, or just day-to-day grind where your primary MOS for your Marines, they're going to be doing that in addition to 2 to 3 collateral duties. Is it doable? Yes. But being able to communicate early and often within the quarter allows that to work its way through the chain of command, that if there are extra funds or extra resources needed to assist the commander, that can be acquired earlier and often.
It all starts with ammo. Your fiscal year training schedule will be outlined to the day the year before. And unlike the fleet, it doesn't change very much. So the first timeline that you're really looking at is ammo. You need to forecast your ammo submissions quarterly. So that can sometimes put you outside of 90 days. You should already know when you're doing live fire, and you should already have pre-established packages for how much and what type of ammunition you're going to need depending on what training you're going to execute. So get the ammo request in first. After that, at exactly the 90-day mark, you should be in RIFMIS reserving the training area that you're going to be using or the range you're going to be utilizing. The important thing to remember is that 4th Marine Division doesn't really have priority over anybody. So the further you wait and the closer you get to the training time, the more likely somebody else is going to come in and bump you off. There's no reason why it shouldn't be at the 90-day mark you get your training areas reserved. From there, you've got 90 to 60 days to get the TSR done, the training support request. That's going to tell you when your buses are going to pick you up, where they're going to drop you off, how you're getting back, where the chow is going to be delivered, or any other bomb or support requirements you need in order to be able to execute training effectively. Simultaneously with that, you're working the training package, LOI, confirmation brief, ORMs, any other required documentation or paperwork you need to execute so that by 30 days out, the entire thing is set in stone and all you need to do is execute. So just like the fleet, McTims has your answers. It will list all of the annual training requirements you have to complete as well as percentages of completion at any time during the year. What you need to do is schedule how exactly you're going to get it done, and you'll have 2 primary challenges. First is the PFT-CFT. It's important that you schedule as many PFTs and as many CFTs as you possibly can during the first and last 6 months of the year in order to get to maximum completion percentages for the SMCR Marines. It's not all of them come to every single one of the drill periods. So if you only schedule 1 or even 2, you will miss guys who through no fault of their own were not able to attend the training. If they didn't receive the opportunity to train, then that's on you. If you've given them multiple opportunities and they still fail to complete it, then it's on them. At our site, we actually have PFTs that we will monitor anytime the SMCR come in, 7 days a week, and we will, during the last half of the year, we will establish a permanent CFT course to bring 1s and 2s in after we run our primaries to clean up the numbers on that end. The second is the MarineNet classes themselves, and there you're going to have a significant hurdle because the SMCR won't do MarineNet. And even when they do, most of those classes require proctor codes. So it's incumbent upon the operations chief and anybody else on the staff who's able to get CAC card readers for your home laptops. When these guys do get to these classes, it's usually after work. So 1700 and beyond when you're already at home. You can't just tell them to call back during normal business hours. You have to be able to facilitate whenever it is that they need if you reasonably expect the training to get done. Anything that doesn't require a certification, like cybersecurity, range safety officer, or any of the PME classes, you can teach the class yourself and run it in McTims as complete, and that's your answer there. Preparing and sustaining preparedness for inspections is more challenging than you may be thinking right now. When we in the fleet think about something like anti-terrorism force protection, it's almost transparent to us. What you have to remember is that here on an I&I station, you have all of the same requirements as an installation. So even if you're working out of a single building with a fence around it, you have to comply with all of the same standards as Camp Pendleton. So there's a lot to learn. Getting to those schools will set you up for success. Beyond that, all of the inspections come with checklists. The idea is to reach out to the inspection team that's actually going to be coming to your site, get their checklist in advance, and every single one of the items on that inspection checklist also has the reference that you can look up. It sets you up for success and it gives you the answer to the test. Beyond that, contacting the inspection team directly or other relevant subject matter experts around MFR will help you out when they tell you exactly how they want certain questions answered that can be a little bit confusing. But the first and primary thing is to get those schools done. If you are an incoming ops chief to an I&I staff, the best thing that you can do to get yourself prepared is to attend the Inter-Service Range Safety Officer course. Chances are you will not be located close enough to train at either Camp Pendleton or Camp Lejeune, which means you'll generally be training at Army bases. All of them require you to build the ranges and SDZs yourself, so getting that training knocked out will make you a lot of money when you first get on deck. Beyond that, you need to learn to speak the language of the SMCR. They use a completely different set of acronyms and terms than we do in 4th Marine Division. So when they talk about T3, TEEPs, or really just about anything else, the words have different meanings than they do in the fleet. So if you walk in with a misunderstanding of what means what, you're going to run into trouble. Wrap your head around how these guys get paid when they come in, because there's different pots of money that pay them depending on what type of training they're doing. That is not necessarily your primary responsibility, but it is something that you're going to need to have oversight on so that you can ensure that the S1 is writing these guys' orders correctly to get them paid what they should be paid and how they should be paid when they show up to drill. The company I&I establishes the prioritization for his staff. Generally, the way you'll see that look is he'll place funerals as top priority, inspections right below that, and then actually training the SMCR Marines somewhere below number 1 and number 2. That is the nature of the game, because inspections and funerals are no-fail missions, whereas training can be a lot more fluid. You can make adjustments on the fly and still achieve mission success. It is your job as the operations chief to manage all of the other staffs. There has to be somebody beating the drum and keeping everybody in check and on beat. If it's not going to be the S3, it won't be anyone. And those duties will fall into a vacuum. Everybody will be doing their own thing, talking only amongst themselves, and that's how you wind up missing funerals, not completing training, or not getting the logistical support required to get it done. Therefore, everything goes through your shop. And you don't need to do everything, but you do need to know how to do everything so that you can run checks and balances on the rest of the I&I staff so that the company I&I is set up for success.
So, continuous education, and whether you do it once a month, once a week, just encourage your administrators to op pause and to sit down and talk through their administrative processes, their administrative responsibilities, just to continue that education to refresh the things that they're not doing regularly. You're gonna reap more benefit from opening the books. So pull the checklist, go through the references, and get a deep understanding of what they're asking and why they're asking those questions on those checklists. I think that's what's gonna educate your Marines the most. The other thing is daily preparation. What are you doing on a daily basis to prepare for the next day, the next week, to continue to meet the marks that you're being asked to meet? And then process improvement. Encourage your administrators to constantly go through their processes and see how we can improve these processes. What can we take out to streamline a process to save time? What needs to be added to hold ourselves accountable? Time and task management is huge on I&I duty. So the more you can help your administrators with that, the more benefits you as an I&I will reap from that time that they're saving. So I'd highly recommend having internal and external meetings. So internal meetings, having meetings between your S1, your S3, and your S4 to discuss upcoming movements. What are the status of orders, TEEP requests, funds, things like that to ensure your Marines are getting where they need to go. Internal meetings between your S1, medical, and S3 to make sure everyone's tracking who's on NPQ, TNPQ, light duty, limited duty, with regards to PFT and CFT to make sure everyone's on the same page. So in internal meetings will go a long way to ensuring that you're meeting a lot of the marks that you're going to be held accountable for on inspections and by your chain of command. With regards to external meetings, I'd recommend you hold regular conference calls with your chain of command just to do accountability across the board to ensure that everyone is aware and tracking upcoming movements, the status of funds, the status of deployments, just that to encourage communication up and down the chain of command so everyone's on the same page. With regards to administrative separations, as an incoming I&I, you want to learn the requirements of the administrative separation process. You want to learn the system that you're going to be working in, but you also want to learn the details of how we administratively separate a Marine, because you're going to be required to put your name on that package, certifying that that package is complete as it goes up the chain of command. To expedite that process and streamline it, you really want to know what to look for. The next thing I'd recommend is to get everyone involved. Get your reservists involved, all your reserve leadership from the NCOs on up. Get them involved to paint that picture of what type of Marine was he before he went UA? What type of Marine was he before he committed a serious offense? Those details are going to be required to be put in the package anyway, so you might as well get the reservists involved. Same thing with your commanders, your first sergeants, your company gunnies. They're going to be required to be involved in this process too and to speak on behalf of those Marines. So get them involved and hold them accountable. That's one of those things that you want to try to get before the reservists step off deck. Get all the requirements from them, get all the documentation you need from them before you let them step off deck for the drill weekend. The last thing I'd recommend for administrative separations is to utilize a checklist. Using a checklist is going to help you understand exactly what you're looking for in that package, but it's also going to help your administrators understand what you expect to get from them. You can find checklists from other units, you could probably get one from your chain of command, but that's going to go a long way in streamlining your administrative separation process. So for a new I&I, the first thing I'd recommend he do is to educate himself. And I think that can apply across all commodities. So with regards to admin, taking a look at, again, checklists and talking to other I&Is with experience to educate himself on some of his responsibilities. Because his job's going to be essentially an administrative officer, along with a supply officer, infantry officer, and everything else he's being asked to do. So the second thing I'd recommend is to establish a battle rhythm. Sit down with your administrators, encourage them to go through their responsibilities and see which of those responsibilities are recurring. And establish a battle rhythm, so at least those recurring responsibilities, you know when they're coming and you can prep to make sure you're prepared to do those, to execute those responsibilities. The last thing I would say is to be actively involved. Understand that your admin chiefs, they're coming from a lot of different areas, but their jobs on I&I duty is a roll-up of an IPAC and a supported unit. And that's a pretty big challenge for a lot of admin chiefs. So a lot of times having an I&I that's involved will help hold them accountable, and they'll know that they have to work extra hard to meet those responsibilities, to learn their jobs, to educate themselves, to, in the long run, take care of that I&I and make his job easier. So the best thing I did, the one thing I learned from my first tour was that our job is kind of an open book test. The checklist for all of our inspections, for MCAT inspections, for IG inspections, for FRAP inspections, they're basically telling you what your responsibilities are. So coming into this, looking at those checklists, refreshing myself, and then when I first checked in, pulling those checklists and actually going through them in detail with my clerks to make sure everyone understood that we were all clear on not just the questions that were being asked, but the answers as well. So I think that gave us a huge leg up. It was a lot of work on the front end, but over the last couple of years, we've reaped the benefits of the time that we put in going through those checklists.